Across the shimmering face of the earth, some have chosen not to conquer the land, but to live upon the water itself. From floating villages woven from reeds to stilted homes that rise with the tides, the water people embody a life shaped by reflection and rhythm. Here, every sunrise ripples across a mirror world. Every journey begins with a paddle's whisper. They have built entire worlds where the ground never stays still, where tradition drifts between sky and current. This is the story of humanity's most fluid existence, where water is not just home, but heritage. Beyond the drifting waters of Tonle Sap, where the horizon blurs between lake and sky, stands Kong Pluke, a village born from the flood. Here, wooden homes rise on towering stilts, their reflections trembling beneath like ghosts of the dry season. For centuries, this community has lived in rhythm with the great breathing heart of Cambodia's inland sea, where every monsoon transforms the land into a boundless expanse of shimmering water. In the beginning, Kong Pluke was a settlement of fishermen and spirit keepers who understood that survival depended on surrender. The Tonle Sap, swelling and shrinking with the pulse of the Mekong, offered both abundance and uncertainty. When the rains came, the mangroves drowned, and the forest turned into a labyrinth of water. Families built upward, not outward, raising their homes high on wooden stilts to escape the flood, creating a floating cathedral of timber and bamboo. Beneath them, canoes drifted like shadows between the stilts, where children learned to row before they could walk. Yet the water that gives life also takes it back. Each year, the floods rise higher, and each year, the wood grows weaker under the sun's decay. The people repair, rebuild, and return to the same fragile balance their ancestors knew. Their lives are written in water, the tides marking time, the lake reshaping memory. When the monsoon recedes, the village stands marooned above the cracked earth, its stilts like the ribs of a forgotten ship. Still, the people remain, anchored by faith in the rhythm of return. At dusk, when the light spills gold over the mangrove canopy, Kong Pluke glows like an apparition, half village, half reflection. Here, the line between earth and water disappears, and existence becomes an act of endurance. In this place of mirrored skies and restless tides, the people of Kong Pluke continue to live suspended between worlds, rooted in water, bound by tradition, and carried always by the breath of the flood. Along the windswept shores of Jeju Island, where volcanic cliffs meet the steel-gray sea, live the Haenyeo, women of the water, heirs to a centuries-old rhythm between breath and tide. Here, in the chill of the Korean Strait, they dive without oxygen, without machines, armed only with a knife, a net, and lungs trained by generations. Each descent is a conversation with the deep, each resurfacing a hymn of survival. Their story began long before modern memory, when men went to sea and women learned to follow the current instead of the plow. The Haenyeo turned the ocean into their harvest field, gathering abalone, sea urchins, and shellfish from the basalt floor. What began as necessity became a sisterhood of endurance. Mothers, daughters, and grandmothers bound by the breath they share. Theirs is a culture carved from hardship, molded by salt and tempered by the cold. The sea gives, but only to those who learn its patience. There is conflict beneath the surface, where silence presses like stone and the body trembles against the weight of depth. Each dive is a test of the invisible, of will, of trust, of ancient instinct. They learn to listen, not with their ears, but with their blood, to know when to rise before the lungs betray them. For centuries, their sharp whistles, called sumbisori, have echoed across the waves, a sound of return, a reminder that life depends on the mastery of the moment between air and water. Today, as tides warm and catches thin, the sea grows more uncertain. The youngest Haenyeo are now few, yet the spirit of the old ones endures. At dawn, when the horizon turns silver and waves strike the black rock, they still wade into the cold, faces weathered by salt and time. Their movements are slow, deliberate, sacred. The world watches, but they do not perform. They simply continue, women breathing with the sea, guardians of a vanishing ritual, and living proof that strength can sound like silence. Across the glassy waters of the Andaman Sea, where the horizon dissolves into endless blue, the Moken drift, the people born to the tide, the last true nomads of the ocean. Their world is a moving horizon, their home a wooden boat that rocks with the pulse of the sea. For generations, they have followed the wind and the stars, reading the language of currents as others read the pages of history. The story of the Moken begins in motion. Long before borders divided the coastlines of Thailand and Myanmar, they sailed freely among islands and hidden coves, guided by constellations and memory. Their boats, called kabeng, are carved by hand and built to cradle families for entire lifetimes. On these floating homes, children learn to swim before they can stand, and elders carry the songs that once mapped the sea. The Moken understood the ocean as a living being, its moods, its tempers, its mercy. To them, land was only a pause between journeys, but the sea is both cradle and test. Storms rise without warning, and the waters that once offered protection now hold uncertainty. Modern boundaries have tightened around their drifting roots, and many have been pressed to settle on land. Yet even on shore, the sea remains their pulse. They remember the rhythm of the waves, the taste of salt on the wind, the shimmer of plankton beneath a moonless sky. Still, a few continue to roam. At dawn, their kabeng glide across the turquoise expanse, silent but alive, carrying a wisdom that cannot be charted. They navigate without compasses, reading ripples, light, and the pull of tides passed down through stories older than maps. When the sun sinks and the stars return, they find direction, not from devices, but from memory itself. The Moken are the sea's own reflection, unanchored, enduring, and free. In every wave they cross, there echoes the quiet defiance of a people who refuse to belong to land. Between the emerald palms of a southern India, where river and sea weave into one another, lies the world of the Kerala backwaters, a boundless network of canals, lagoons, and slow-moving rivers that breathe with the rhythm of the tide. Here, life glides upon reflection. Wooden canoes drift past floating schools and markets that shimmer between coconut groves. In this mirrored world, water is not a barrier, but a path, carrying generations through the liquid heart of Kerala. Centuries ago, these backwaters formed as the Arabian Sea retreated, leaving behind a labyrinth that became both refuge and highway. Villages rose on thin strips of land between the channels, and homes floated above the stillness like fragments of an unending dream. The people learned to live not against the water, but with it, adapting to its moods, measuring time by its rise and fall. The canals became the veins of a living landscape, binding communities through a rhythm older than the written word. Yet beauty here has always been intertwined with endurance. The monsoon reshapes everything it touches, flooding the land and silencing the fields. Still, when the storms pass, the waters calm again, gleaming beneath the returning sun. Through centuries of colonial trade, changing tides, and modern roads creeping in from beyond the palms, the people of the backwaters have kept their floating harmony intact. Their boats, once filled with rice and coir, still glide between water lilies, tracing routes that their ancestors carved in silence. At dusk, when the sky turns to copper and reflections blur into shadow, the canals whisper with unseen movement. Lanterns flicker from houseboats, their lights bending across the water's surface like scattered stars. Here, the past does not vanish, It drifts, weightless, through every ripple. The Kerala backwaters remain a living mosaic of land and liquid, where tradition flows like the tide and time itself seems to move by oar. Along the winding Sepik River, where the water moves like smoke beneath a canopy of mist, entire villages rise on stilts above the flood. This is the spirit realm of Papua New Guinea's Sepik people, a place where art, myth, and water flow as one. Their homes stand tall against the current, carved with ancestral symbols that seem to breathe in the humid air. Every carving, every canoe, every pole that touches the river carries a story passed through generations who have lived between land and tide. The origins of these Sepik villages are rooted in both fear and reverence. The river is sacred, but it is also a force that devours. Crocodiles glide beneath the surface, seen not as beasts, but as the living spirits of creation. To survive its moods, the people built upward, their homes perched on stilts of mangrove and palm. Above the waterline, they found safety from the floods and the creatures below, creating a floating architecture that mirrors their myths, a world suspended between the human and the divine. Life here has always been sculpted by the river's rhythm. The Sepik people became master woodcarvers, transforming the timber around them into totems and masks that speak to the unseen. Their ceremonial houses, soaring above the current, are sanctuaries of power where ancestral spirits dwell in silence. Each structure tells the story of a tribe's origin, its trials, its union with the river that feeds and tests it. Yet the river never sleeps. Seasons shift, waters rise, and storms erase the shorelines that memory builds. Still, the Sepik people remain, guided by the same pulse that shaped their ancestors. At sunset, when the river burns gold and the air hums with distant drums, the stilt villages appear as silhouettes of belief itself. In this place, where crocodiles guard the depths and stories are carved into wood and water, humanity lives not apart from nature, but within its breath, enduring, spiritual, and forever bound to the river's soul. In the tidal heart of Sabah, where the mangroves breathe with the sea, lie the Nipa palm water villages, hidden settlements woven between roots and reflection. Here, bamboo houses rise gently above green water, their stilts anchored in shifting tides. The air carries the scent of salt and wood, and canoes glide soundlessly through narrow channels where sunlight filters in ribbons through palm fronds. This is a world half concealed, half revealed, a living tapestry suspended between forest and ocean. Long ago, settlers followed the mangrove maze inland, seeking protection from storms and open sea. The Nipa palms offered shelter and structure. Their leaves turned into thatch, their trunks into stilts, their fruit into sustenance. Over time, the people learned to build with the tide, not against it, constructing homes that sway with the current, adjusting their lives to the breathing rhythm of the estuary. What emerged was a settlement that seemed to float within the forest itself, blending so completely with nature that even the wind could not tell where land ended and life began. The waters here are both pathway and provider. Fishermen still cast nets at dawn, while the mangroves shimmer with the cries of herons. Beneath the surface, crabs and shellfish move among tangled roots that hold the coastline together. Each stilt, each bamboo beam tells a story of adaptation, a quiet resilience shaped by patience and tide. The people's bond with the mangrove is not of conquest, but of coexistence. As day fades into dusk, the channels turn to mirrors, and the villages dissolve into shadow. Lanterns flicker from windows like stars adrift among trees, and the sound of paddles becomes the only trace of movement. In the stillness, one feels the weight of centuries lived in silence and salt. The Nipa palm water villages endure as sanctuaries of balance, where architecture breathes, water listens, and humanity moves in harmony with the green pulse of the sea. Across the vast Pacific, where the wind hums with salt and the horizon glows like molten glass, the Laguna people of Vanuatu have built their lives upon the living skin of the sea. Their homes rise on stilts anchored to coral reefs, standing in clear turquoise lagoons that mirror the sky. Here, the tides whisper against wooden walls, and canoes drift through water so pure it reveals the breath of the ocean below. This is not just a village. It is a floating reflection of harmony between humankind and the deep. The story of the Laguna people begins with coral. For generations, they have lived in the shallow lagoons that fringe the volcanic islands of Vanuatu, choosing the water as their foundation. The reefs offered them both protection and providence, a natural fortress against waves and a larder of life. To build their homes, they drove wooden posts deep into the reef, creating stilt houses that rise like delicate crowns above the lagoon. From above, the settlement appears as a constellation scattered across blue glass, each home a fragment of the sea's own architecture. Their days have always flowed with the rhythm of the tide. When the sun lifts over the horizon, canoes glide outward, following the reef channels that twist like veins through the lagoon. The sea provides everything: food, shelter, even the stories that bind the generations. Their songs speak of spirits that live within the coral and winds that guide the travelers who once crossed from distant islands. The ocean is not merely backdrop, but ancestor, shaping both body and belief. Yet this paradise carries its trials. Storms sweep across the Pacific with sudden force, tearing at roofs and flooding homes. Coral reefs, once vibrant and strong, now bleach beneath the warming currents. Still, the Laguna people endure, rebuilding as their ancestors did, board by board, tide by tide. Their knowledge of the water runs deeper than memory, preserved in the rhythm of paddles and the curve of the shoreline they call home. At dusk, when the sea burns gold and the coral glows beneath the fading light, the Laguna villages shimmer like a dream suspended between water and sky. In this fragile balance, the people remain, guardians of a vanishing harmony, living proof that life can bloom even upon the edge of the tide. Amid the emerald waters of northern Vietnam, where limestone cliffs rise like silent guardians from the mist, life floats in quiet defiance of gravity. Here, in the drifting villages of Halong Bay, classrooms sway gently with the tide. Wooden platforms moored between towering karsts serve as schools, and the sea itself becomes the blackboard upon which the next generation learns to read the world. The voices of children carry across the still water like birdsong, fragile, resilient, and endlessly moving. The story of these floating schools begins with the fishermen who once lived entirely upon the bay. For centuries, their families built homes on rafts, anchored in sheltered coves where land was scarce, and the sea provided all they needed. As generations passed, the children of these waterborne families required a place to learn, yet the nearest towns lay far beyond the maze of islets. So the villagers built their own classrooms upon the water, simple wooden structures roofed in tin, rocking gently in rhythm with the waves. In these schools, lessons were shaped by the tide. Teachers arrived by boat, their journeys traced through fog and rain, carrying chalk and books that smelled faintly of salt. The conflict here has always been one of endurance. Storms sweep through the bay with the sudden fury of the monsoon, scattering boats and silencing lessons. Yet, even as the rain lashes and the wind howls, the floating schools endure, tethered by ropes and faith. The children return when the skies clear, their laughter echoing against the cliffs, their pencils tracing dreams that rise beyond the horizon. Today, as Halong Bay draws travelers from distant lands, the floating schools remain symbols of quiet determination. The world may change beyond the karsts, but here, the rhythm of learning still flows with the tide. At sunset, when the sea turns to liquid gold and the limestone towers cast long shadows across the bay, the sound of recitation drifts over the water, a hymn to persistence, a song of hope rising from the waves. In Halong Bay, education floats not as luxury but as a way of life sustained by the sea. Deep within the emerald vastness of the Peruvian Amazon, where the forest breathes mist and the sky reflects an endless water, whole communities drift between the seasons. The river is their road, their field, their memory. Here, families live in floating homes that rise and fall with the flood, adjusting not by choice, but by ancient rhythm. During high water, when the Amazon swells into a moving sea, schools, markets, and even soccer fields lift and drift among the treetops. A world turned upside down, yet perfectly balanced in its own design. The story of these river villages begins with the forest itself. Centuries ago, people settled along the tributaries of the great Amazon, building homes on rafts and stilts to follow the changing water. The river became both foundation and frontier, offering fish, fertile soil, and passage through a wilderness without roads. Over time, they learned the language of the flood, the slow rise that swallows the banks, the steady retreat that reveals the world again. In this cycle, they found not disruption, but continuity, a calendar written in water. Life here is shaped by motion. When the floods come, canoes replace footsteps, and every direction becomes a channel. Houses made of balsa and palm sway gently with the current, tethered by ropes that stretch like vines between the trees. When the water recedes, the same homes rest upon the exposed earth, waiting for the next swell. It is a rhythm that demands surrender, a trust that what rises will fall, and what disappears will return. But the floods grow stronger now, and the dry seasons shorter. The river changes its moods faster than memory can follow. Still, the people endure, guided by instinct and the wisdom of generations who have floated before them. At dusk, as the last light drips through the canopy and the jungle hums an endless chorus, the floating villages shimmer in reflection. Homes, schools, and lives suspended between water and sky. In this shifting world, the people of the Amazon have learned the rarest form of survival: to live not against nature's will, but within its endless tide. Across the golden waters of southern Benin, where dawn rises in a haze of smoke and reflection, lie the quiet villages of Lake Nokoue, floating communities beyond the famed Ganvier, anchored in faith and water. Here, wooden homes rest upon stilts driven into the lake bed, their walls painted with the sun's shifting light. Canoes glide through corridors of reflection, guided not by compass but by tradition. This is a world where life, spirit, and water are inseparable, a place where every ripple carries the whisper of ancestors. The story of Lake Nokoue's people begins in refuge. Centuries ago, during the age of kingdoms and wars, families fled to the lake's shallows, seeking safety among its reeds and islands. The water became their shield, its depth their deliverance. Over time, they built villages upon its surface, raising homes, markets, and temples that floated in unison with the wind. But unlike the distant cities of land, these were settlements rooted in belief. The lake was sacred, a living spirit that demanded respect and reciprocity. Here, every fisherman begins his day not with the cast of a net, but with a blessing. Small offerings are lowered into the water: palm wine, crushed herbs, the whispered name of a protective deity. Their faith draws from the ancient Vodun traditions of West Africa, where gods inhabit wind, fire, and sea. The lake's spirits, they say, watch over the living and the drowned alike. Their protection is woven into every boat, every fish caught beneath the mirrored surface. The water gives, but it also tests. Storms can shatter canoes and tides may shift without warning, yet the people remain. The lake has become both home and altar, both livelihood and legacy. At dusk, when the air fills with the scent of smoke and salt, chants rise from the floating shrines, echoing across the stillness. In that moment, Lake Nokoue becomes more than a body of water. It becomes a world of devotion suspended between the mortal and the divine. Beyond Ganvier's bustle, these lesser-known villages keep the lake's truest rhythm alive, a rhythm of reverence, resilience, and the eternal dialogue between human hands and sacred water. Across the misty waters of the Venetian lagoon, where sea and sky dissolve into one another, rise the islands of Burano and Torcello, Europe's oldest living lagoon communities. Here, color and calm coexist in perfect reflection. Houses painted in vivid hues of crimson, ochre, and turquoise line narrow canals, their mirrored faces rippling upon the tide. Between them, fishermen glide silently in wooden boats, continuing traditions as old as Venice itself. This is a world born from the sea, yet forever balanced upon its fragile grace. The story of Burano and Torcello began in flight. Centuries ago, as invaders swept across the mainland, people fled into the marshes, finding safety upon sandbanks hidden by mist. What began as refuge soon became civilization. The settlers drove wooden piles into the mud, built homes above the water, and created islands that would one day give birth to Venice. While the great city rose into a monument of stone and empire, Burano and Torcello remained closer to their origins, humble, enduring, and quietly beautiful. In Burano, color became the language of belonging. Each home was painted differently so fishermen returning through fog could recognize their family's door. Nets were mended on sun-warmed steps, and boats were built by hand, shaped for the rhythm of the tide. Across the water, Torcello kept its solemn grace, once the spiritual heart of the lagoon, its ancient churches and bell towers still standing guard over reeds and silence. Together the islands reflect both sides of the Venetian soul, one vibrant and living, the other sacred and still. Yet the lagoon is a world forever shifting. Rising tides nibble at the foundations, and modern life presses in from the mainland. But as evening falls and the canals turn to molten gold, Burano's colors glow brighter, and Torcello's stones breathe the memory of centuries. In this fragile mosaic of water and light, the people remain, guardians of a vanishing rhythm, keeping alive the heartbeat of an ancient world that still drifts between tide and time. Where the Tonle Sap widens into an endless mirror of sky and water, a city floats, a world without streets, without soil, yet alive with motion and sound. This is Tonle Chhnok Tru, one of Asia's largest floating towns, where homes, temples, and markets drift together upon the flood. From above, it appears like a tapestry of colors upon liquid glass, a city that rises and falls with the lake's breath. Beneath its calm surface lies a story of resilience, adaptation, and faith in the changing rhythm of the water. The origins of Tonle Chhnok Tru stretch deep into Cambodia's river history. Centuries ago, families settled here to follow the migrations of fish that sustained the Khmer heartland. When the monsoon rains swelled the Tonle Sap, the land vanished beneath water, and the people followed the current, building homes that floated instead of drowned. Their houses, tethered by bamboo and anchored by hope, formed neighborhoods that moved as one. Over time, a full city emerged, a drifting labyrinth complete with schools, shops, pagodas, and even a floating police station that watches over the waves. Life here follows the pulse of the flood. As the lake expands, families paddle from house to house, Markets gather where the current is calm, and monks travel by boat to offer blessings from floating temples. When the waters recede, the city draws closer together, resting upon the softened mud until the rains return. The people do not resist the flood. They live by it, timing every action to its rise and fall.